All right, I'm going to call this meeting back to order and ask everybody to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we welcome everybody to the council meeting of April 22nd, 2019, and we've already called the roll and did the notice. Okay, terrific. So I'll start on my right with announcements. Councilwoman Niedergang, any announcements?
Thank you, Mayor Lempert. So I've mentioned these previously, but just wanted to remind everyone that Princeton Environmental Commission has 2 upcoming meetings on Saturday, May 4th, 10 to 12 a.m. at Mountain Lakes House, ways to address food waste on your property, specifically backyard composting, worms, and chickens. So please join us for that. And then Sustainable Princeton's Green Fest will be held on Saturday, May 11th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the courtyard of the Princeton Shopping Center. And there will be a number of environmental organizations there with information, so please stop by. And finally, from Shade Tree, that Communiversity is a week or less than a week away, and the Shade Tree Committee gives out saplings to people who are interested in planting, so you can come by their booth and grab a tree to be. All right, that's it.
I'll just make a really quick announcement that the Bicycle Advisory Committee is providing greatly expanded valet bike parking at Communiversity this year. 2 locations. We're continuing at High Tops, which is where it was provided last year, and it's also going to be, I guess, at the French Market location, which is this little stretch along Nassau Street between Mercer and University. So please consider riding your bicycles to Communiversity instead of driving. You can walk, that's okay too.
And is the parking free if you ride your bike?
It's absolutely free.
Just some quick ones. Just a reminder that the Youth Advisory Committee is accepting applications for the 2019-2020 school year. And we are looking at Princeton students who they can go to not just the public school, it also includes the private schools. So it would be for students who are 9th graders this year, but will be sophomores in the 2019-2020 school years. I encourage you to apply. Application deadline is May 24th. My other announcement, actually on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission, which will for the first time have a booth at Communiversity this year, and will be next to the Shade Tree Commission, I found out. And coincidentally, you're giving away saplings because we are encouraged to give away eco-friendly giveaways and not things that are going to end up in the trash. We came up with, we found some seed paper that has seeds for flowers. We're going to print motivational quotes on them, and that will be our giveaway. So you'll give away trees. We're giving away flowers that folks can plant. The other one I had, just a reminder, I know Eve, you mentioned that at the last council meeting, but just a reminder that on May 7th at 7 p.m., we're going to be hosting a dog park interest group community meeting here in the community room. So for folks who are interested in the initiative, we want to hear from you. And again, that's May 7th, 7 p.m. here in this building in the community room.
Me? Okay, thanks. Just want to remind everyone that Corner House on Friday, May 3rd, 2019, the Corner House Foundation will be hosting its 2019 annual spring benefit called the Star Spangled Event. It will be held at the Boathouse at Mercer Lake beginning at 6 p.m. They will be honoring our former councilman, Lance Liverman, and of course the proceeds will go to Corner House's many behavioral health activities. And if you want more information on ticketing, et cetera, you can visit the website at www.cornerhousenj.org. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I have several announcements, mostly about upcoming meetings. We're going to be having a meeting here in this room a week from tonight on the 29th at 7:30 p.m., and that will be about the food waste program and next steps for the food waste program. Then there will be another council meeting the week after that on Monday, May 7th. We're going to be moving the scheduled time of the council meeting. So originally it was scheduled for the 13th. That will now be held on the 6th. And instead, on the 13th, we'll be holding a special council meeting devoted to the affordable housing plan. Oh, I did? May 6th is Monday. That's going to be the regular council meeting. The new date for the regular council meeting, May 6th, and then May 13th, Monday, May 13th, will be the special meeting for affordable housing. And those both meet at 7 p.m. Then on Wednesday, May 8th, we're going to be having another special council meeting that's more of a discussion type meeting. We were invited by students at the university who are part of the Whig-Clio Association over there to have a meeting on campus. So we'll be meeting on campus May 8th at 7 p.m. And I still need to work with the students on putting together a discussion agenda. My expectation is we'll probably notice it as we won't be taking any action there, but it will hopefully be a good opportunity for a discussion. There will be a information session on May 1st, the morning of May 1st, at 8:30 a.m. in the Princeton Public Library, and this is for local businesses who are interested in finding out how to do business with the town, how to do business with the school district, and how to do business with Princeton University. So we invite all interested local businesses to attend that. The governor's office has announced that the Dinky will be reopening its service on Sunday, May 12th. So that is welcome news. Then my last announcement is that we are accepting applications for a permit parking task force. And this task force is going to be looking at permit parking regulations for street parking for both residents and for employees of local businesses, and also making sure that there's room on the street for other people who might not fit into either one of those categories. So if you're interested in working on that issue, there's an application on the princetonnj.gov website. Applications are due May 3rd, and we're looking for a balance of people to serve on there, so both employees and also residents of the impacted neighborhoods. And the impacted neighborhoods are all those neighborhoods that are essentially walkable into the downtown. With that, are there any staff reports or announcements? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. And we'll start with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium, and we'll start with Paul Shore.
Thank you and good evening. I live at 299 Hamilton Avenue, Princeton, New Jersey, and I really appreciate everything council does, the mayor, and all the people who work for the town. They're terrific. I do have one complaint. I knew you knew that was coming. I'm here to ask council what appeals of the compliance plan on Hamilton Avenue can be made or presented to council. And I have 3 reasons. One is there was a lack of notice. In other words, the compliance plan is presented to the county sometime in November of the preceding year, this year to being the tax year being 2019. So the compliance plan for the Hamilton Avenue neighborhood was presented to the county for their approval in November of 2018. No one had any notice about that, and I think we needed to have some opportunity to comment on that. The second reason is that the compliance plan itself included what we consider to be an invalid sale to justify the ratio of sales to assessed values that the tax assessor now believed were out of range of the compliance plan rules. It's an invalid sale because it was a tear down. He didn't realize that at the time. So it in some way relates to the mega mansion FAR ordinance that's on the table tonight. And lastly, because it increases our taxes. So.
Okay, I can help to address that, and then maybe Ms. Krummeller wants to chime in. You're correct in that the tax assessor reports up to the county, and I hate to push you off on someone else, but really the best thing to do is if you feel that you were incorrectly assessed, is to first set up a meeting with the tax assessor. It sounds like you might have already spoken to him. And then if he's not willing to make the adjustment, then you can file an appeal. But that is the process. As the local governing body, there's sort of a red line between us and the tax assessor because they don't want us determining what people's homes are worth or making that into anything that's political. So that's why the assessor, we pay him, but his boss is actually the county to help keep those lines clear. So if you feel like it's unfair and the tax assessor's not willing to make that adjustment for you, then you have to go to the county and appeal.
Thank you so much. We are following those steps, and neighbors have filed appeals with the county, and we have met with the tax assessor. Neil is terrific. He's always answered every question we had in a timely, quick fashion. So, and in that process, it's how we and he have, and I can't speak for him, but we realized that one of the sales that he used to justify the compliance plan was, in our opinion, invalid because it was based on a tear down. And that really, and if you beg my respectful question, the first question I asked about was notice. And while the statute for compliance plans may not require notice and leaves it entirely up to the tax assessor as to where and when compliance plans should be done in the municipality, that's a deficiency. And I think the statute, and only council can make a comment on the statutory basis for the compliance plan and the notice or lack of notice to residents, all residents.
Right, that's a fair point, and I think next year we can have something. I mean, I want to make clear that people realize it's not, we don't have a ton of power over it, but I think we can put that out there, right? Is there a problem with putting it out there?
What I would say is we can ask the question, but I think it should be very clear that the county, in terms of the process, the county does control that process. We can actually we can always make an ask.
Right.
We can do that.
Right.
But they will make the determination on what.
Right, or if we're given the information, we have a section of our agenda called correspondence, and we can put it in correspondence, so at least people see it in the agenda, and it's clear that this is something that the county is doing, just so people are aware. Okay.
Liz, I also wonder if people realize that it is done every year, the compliance plan.
Right.
So,
but I think
so it's just, so everyone should expect it, that it's happening, I mean,
right.
unfortunately
I think
or
the point was like
unfortunately.
you're not impacted every year, so just
Right,
knowing
but
when you're.
it's every year the compliance plan happens. It wasn't just this year.
So when we got around to Neil discussing that with us, he indicated that different municipalities approach the compliance plan differently. For example, Montgomery does it every 5 years, and that's an option in the statute. So it's still a municipal option as to whether you do it every year or every 5 years. And in addition to considering it out of range issues once every 10 years. So there are variations to that theme.
Thank you. Elizabeth Brown?
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Brown. I live in 8 Edgehill Street. And you've heard me often talk about the traffic on Edgehill Street and Hibbins Streets because of the PTS development. Now I'd like to talk about the broader situation and express my support for Jenny and Eve, who I understand are organizing a traffic summit. I've lived in this town since 1965, when there used to be a middle class in town. There was much less traffic, and I've just seen the taxes go up and the traffic go up even faster. I went to the very interesting transportation conference you guys had, and I was just staggered by the number of vehicles that come through Princeton, which are simply drive-throughs. They aren't people driving from Pennsylvania, like many of my friends, to work at the university. They're just driving through. This town means nothing to them except as an obstacle. And, well, some of them are very nice and considerate people. Many of them drive just to get through here as fast as possible. I know that the town has limited options. There's only so much the police can do. They probably should be giving a lot more speeding tickets, but I think I was given a figure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, of 180,000 vehicles going through this town that are drive-throughs, and the police would have to hand out an awful lot of speeding tickets to make an impact on that population. So I'm putting in a request for much broader traffic calming. I live on a street that is a cut-through that is sort of a byproduct of the problems on Stockton and Mercer, and there are people all over town who live in cut-throughs, and it makes it hard for them to walk downtown. If they live near downtown, it also makes it hard for them to get out of their driveways and get to work in the morning if they drive to work. So I would very much appreciate sort of a new approach, because I feel the town is reaching a tipping point where the out-of-town traffic is just choking the life in the town. It's bad for the businesses, it's bad for our health, it's bad for safety. So I'd very much appreciate anything you can do.
Thank you. And then Drew Dyson, did you want to speak now, or you want to wait for the Senior Resource Center resolution? Okay, and then Lisa Wu.
Good evening, Mayor and Council member. I'd like to refresh your memory. Almost 2 years ago, August 2017, I pleaded for Princeton Town have nutrition lunch back. It happened June 4th, 2018, but still we receive a cold sandwich, and I'm very concerned. This elderly senior, 91 years old, Barbara Young, and 96 years old, Pauline. I forgot the last name, but they constantly complain that we need to have a warm meal. And I know I spoke to Mr. Jeffrey Grosser, the assistant to the administrator. That was back in January, and we're talking about 3 months. And I spoke to Eileen at the Trenton. She is Aging Service Director. She said everything's ready. They ordered 2 stoves to install, and everything's ready except the tongue is not moving. And I was wondering, after 20 months, I think this is a little bit excessive. It's too long, takes too long. And I also have another complaint. I noticed before parking meter, a nickel, 5 cents, I can park 3 minutes. Now it's only 2 minutes. So by calculation, that it's increased 50%. Before it's $1 for 1 hour, now it's $1.50 for 1 hour. If my calculation is wrong, someone can correct me. But I thought that was, and then they take away grace period 10 minutes. I just think it's just 50% increase is just too much. That is my take. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we can address both of those issues. Mark, did you want to
Sure.
update on the hot lunch program?
Absolutely. As council's aware, we're currently providing a cold lunch. One of the issues is really having a facility where we can provide a hot lunch. We've tentatively identified a facility where we can do that. However, there are a number of repairs that are necessary for that facility. Council will be getting a quote, actually a contract. It's some roofing work that we need to do at their next council meeting to provide, make those repairs. Once those repairs are made, the county is willing to go in, redo the kitchen facilities will allow us to do a hot lunch at that time. The delay is only because of the facility that we did find does require repairs, and we're hard at work trying to make those repairs.
And do you have an estimated date on when it will be ready?
At this time, I do not. Once we get the contract in place, I could better be able to give council the date.
Okay. And then to answer your questions about the parking, we had a special parking meeting. Was that last week? Last week. Yes. Been having a lot of meetings. And one of the areas of consensus was to bring back the 10-minute grace period. That has to be done through an ordinance, so that will be coming up for introduction at our May 6th council meeting. And it's true that the rates went up. There are a lot of reasons for that. One, they hadn't been adjusted in a long time, and really the primary driver is that now we accept credit cards, which is a convenience for many, many parkers, and the credit card companies take a huge chunk out of the parking, and you're not allowed to charge different for the credit card users than for the coin users. So unfortunately, just to make it all work, the rates went up. But that's, in a few sentences, what happened. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on anything that's not already on the agenda?
Hello, Joshua Zinder. I had just 2 questions on the announcements that you had made. First, I couldn't hear, you said there was going to be a special food waste meeting?
Yes, on April 29th, which is a week from this evening, and that is going to start at 7:30 p.m. And I believe it's here. Do you know if it's here? It's here in this room.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question was, I believe Eve mentioned about composting and chickens. And does that mean that the town is going to be changing their ordinance allowing chickens in the former borough?
Some members of the Princeton Environmental Commission are working on something. Right now they're doing research on other towns that have ordinances, and they hope to be able to present something to council for adoption next year. but as of now, it's still a very gray area. So I'm not sure if you're thinking of getting chickens, if you have chickens.
It's not gray, it's pretty specific that if your property has less than 100 feet to a clear area, you can't have chickens on the property.
That's what the
current ordinance says, yeah.
Right, so
So it basically eliminates 99% of property.
Right, so I can tell you that definitely the impetus behind whatever the new ordinance would be to encourage people even on small lots to be able to have chickens. Like definitely the Tree Streets and Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood came up in this discussion for health reasons, for community reasons, for all kinds of things, that the ordinance will be written in such a way, you may not be able to have a flock, but you may be able to have one or two or whatever. The details will be worked out, and if you have any input, please contact me or Princeton Environmental Committee to give us whatever thoughts you have.
Great, thank you.
On that. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, too, that has not really been discussed by council yet, so I think that...
Very true.
I think we want to have clarity with the ordinance. But it's also something where I think looking around to other communities, it can be a multi-meeting project. And so I think when council does I think this is a perfect example of when we do our goals for the year. Do we want to elevate chickens or do we want to work on other projects? So it's...
I think
I'm not making a determination one way or the other. I'm just saying that I think we have to go into it. I don't want to overpromise that.
Right. PC has
don't go shopping yet, Josh. Sorry.
PC has said this would most likely be one of their highest ranked goals for the year, but yes, you're right. This is all speculative, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize.
I think, if I could, I think that the chicken working group decided that they would spend this year on education for the community to begin the conversations that we as a community will need to have. I know Michael's got a chuckle out of the use of the term chicken working group. And I would just point out that May 4th is International Chicken Day, so everyone celebrate.
Thank you for that.
Hopefully not by eating chicken.
That's from our resident vegan, so yes. Okay. Now I'm got distracted. Oh, is there anybody else who'd like to comment on anything that's not already on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, I'll close public comment and we'll move on to reports. And the first report is the police report, both from February 2019 and also the annual report from 2018. And I'd like to invite up Chief Sutter.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought that I would start by highlighting some things in the annual report, kind of some of our the information that I took away as being most important to the public. Kind of walk you through that, and then take any questions that you have on either report. So I just wanted to start in your packet, page 52. Which is the Princeton Police Department demographic information in the annual report. And I wanted to give you some background on this. This illustrates each year since 2013, we've given a snapshot of the department diversity as compared to the community that we serve, so Princeton obviously. And through our accreditation process, that's the main standard that the accreditors judge us against, is the diversity as you represent the community. So one thing I thought was a big takeaway for us was the department now as compared to 2013 when we consolidated. So in 2013, our demographic information was 79% Caucasian officers as opposed to 65% now. African American officers were 8%, composed 8% of the department, and now compose 14% of the department. Hispanic officers in 2013 were 13%, and as opposed to 18 now, and our officers of Asian background are 3% versus 0 in 2013. With that diversity has come some really diverse backgrounds and a lot of really just highly qualified people that we've been able to recruit. But one of the things that we talk about a lot in Public Safety Committee is how this relates to supervision and at our command and supervisory levels. That diversity has also increased, but it relates directly to recruiting, because we can only be as diverse in our ranks as we are at our level of recruiting. So we see that as a major goal, and has been as we continue through our planning processes. And I just thought that, we've made that a #1 priority in our recruiting plan. And Mayor and Council since 2013 has really supported our recruiting and been proactive, and that's allowed us to make these gains. So I stress that moving forward the importance of our recruiting plan, and we will see that really benefit the department for decades to come. We're bringing on officers that'll be here for 30 years. So that's how important this process really is. So I thought this was a good illustration of kind of where we've come from since consolidation. I wanted to move you to page 53. In 20...
I'm looking at, like, the number of the police report.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking in your packet. So on the police report, it'd be page 2 in the actual police report.
Okay.
53 in the overall packet, agenda packet. Princeton Policing by the numbers, it's entitled. This is in the annual report we're in. We, if you remember, back in 2016 and 2017, we were proactively trying to look internally at our policing processes. There was a lot of national conversation taking place regarding police departments, race, ethnicity, relations with the communities, officer-involved use of force. And we really felt strongly, when I say we, the department, the Public Safety Committee, Mayor and Council, that we wanted to be proactive and start examining these things really, quite honestly. In policing, we say often, unfortunately, it's a matter of when, not if, we have issues in terms of use of force or other high-profile types of incidents. So we wanted to be proactive and look at ourselves internally to see how we were doing and compare ourselves. And if you remember, in 2017, we instituted a review by the Rutgers University Police Institute. And in that assessment, they looked at mostly motor vehicle, well, actually all motor vehicle stop data as it relates to all the things I have listed in here, the aggregate number of stops, stops by race, on the aggregate, stops by race by individual officers, and it kept going down and down and down, daylight stops as compared to nighttime stops. And these experts reviewed this information and developed a program basically for us to analyze trends in the aggregate and trends in the individual's officers that could show a bias. And it gave us the tools to dig deeper to see why these patterns existed. It was very successful, and we learned a lot, but what we took out of it was we were able to use it in other areas. So we took what we learned in this study, and we took the kind of the program that they gave us, and we spoke with the ACLU, and we looked at what the ACLU has determined as those areas of policing that are most indicative of discriminatory policing. It's the areas where discriminatory policing really becomes most evident in trends and in things that police officers do proactively. So things that things like searches, things like motor vehicle stops are one, but pedestrian stops are another. So what we did was we instituted this program, and we now examine all of these different areas that are listed in the report, which I'll take you through, and we look for trends in all of these areas, not just in motor vehicle stops, and we look at them quarterly. and then we look at them annually. We look at them on the aggregate, and we look at individual officers. And if we determine that there's a trend or something that we see that's trending one direction or another, we can dig and look deeper and find out why. And, you know, that's a proactive step. So the process has been very, very good for us to go through every quarter. And what we've found is that the numbers, they're just statistics now, so there's more than statistics, but the statistics have been very, very in the same areas. They don't, it's amazing how they don't deviate, because that's really just based on what our officers are out there doing every day. They're acting in the same ways. It's a culture, hopefully. But when something goes awry, we'll be able to see it very quickly. So we now have 2 years, actually, I'm sorry, a year and a half of data, because we started doing this in the second half of 2017. So if you flip through to the next page, you'll see that we applied it to things like use of force. So we looked at the individual officers and the aggregate on who force was being used on. Now, one thing to keep in mind sometimes with force is it's not a proactive or discretionary step all the time. It's something that's it's a situation that arises. One could argue it's discretionary at times, especially when it's used improperly. So we look at these. We not only look at these in numbers, but we analyze each and every use of force incident, and it goes through a 7-step process. And what you'll see is we broke out the numbers, and you'll see that you know, I highlighted certain things, and part of the problem with the statistics is that our outcomes are often low, and that's a good thing. So, for instance, you know, we had a use of force on African American individuals. There were 11 in 2018. The thing that the numbers don't show that's important for background is that if there's 3 officers on a scene and 3 officers are involved in handcuffing one person, that's 3 use of forces on one person, 1 incident but 3 use of force. So what we come to find out is, for instance, there it shows that 52% of the time it was used on African American subjects. Well, the fact of the matter was it was multiple officers with the same individual multiple times. So really, when you break this stuff down, so this is kind of what I wanted to show you, is that the numbers give us something to look at and dig into and find out what the numbers mean. And we're able to do that quarterly to predict trends. So it's been a very successful thing for us to do, and I think we've kind of been on the cutting edge, especially for departments our size, and that all started with that proactive study that we did in 2017. So we use this type of this data for motor vehicle stops, pedestrian stops, probable cause searches. Probable cause searches are they're discretionary in the way that they're done, but they're done on an officer encounters somebody and develops a threshold of probable cause to conduct a search. So this is a very, very often a very, you know, it's an intrusive thing. It's a very personal thing. You're driving in a motor vehicle and your car gets searched. So it's a high kind of risk thing for us that we examine very, very closely, each and every one of them. So we look at that. And we also go through arrests in the same manner. So I just wanted to, and as we finish, I can take questions, but I just wanted to give you the background so that you kind of knew what that meant and where it came from and why we do it. If you jump forward to the next page, which is our internal affairs, this would be page 5 in the report, and page 50, actually page 6 and page 57 in your packet. This is our internal affairs data. Internal affairs is controlled by the Attorney General's guideline. It's actually state law and Attorney General's guideline. And we're required by law to investigate all these in a very specific manner. All these designations that you see in this report are designations that each and every department in the state of New Jersey must use, and they have to be investigated the same way and recorded the same way. And these numbers get forwarded to first to the prosecutor's office and then to the Attorney General's office. And then they're reviewed again by them, and they'll sometimes look, if there's something that we either point out to them or they see, they'll look a little deeper. So there is a level of oversight there, independent oversight, which is good. What I wanted to point out in our internal affairs data is that the majority of complaints, actually the overwhelming majority, are demeanor complaints. So they're usually from motor vehicle stops, and they're usually from motor vehicle stops that result in summonses. And it's a issue with sometimes with the officer's demeanor, attitude, their perception of such. And the good thing in these instances is that we have the video and cameras and microphones in our vehicles that record these stops. So we can, when we get a complaint, we can look at them, and the evidence is very clear, and it's right there for us to see. And we'll often bring the person in, show them the video, and we'll often bring the officer in and show him or her the video. And it's a good learning experience for the officer sometimes, because they're humans and they make mistakes, and it's a good learning experience. So that's the overwhelming amount of complaints that we get, which is a good thing. And you'll see where across the top the dispositions are sustained, exonerated, not sustained. So obviously sustained would be a complaint that we look at and find that the officer either violated a rule, a law, a policy, an ordinance, or was just, either rude or not acting in the manner that he or she should be. That will result in, and this is even enumerated in the guideline as to training, retraining, counseling, or discipline, all the way up to termination for serious offenses. Exonerated, obviously, is where we find that an officer acted properly within all rules and regulations and policy, and we find that as exonerated. Not sustained is where there's not enough evidence to prove either way. And unfounded is where we find out that the incident either didn't occur or didn't occur in the way that it was reported. All these dispositions are reviewed by the prosecutor's office and by the Attorney General too. So they go up there to be reviewed. And then I just wanted to jump forward to page 9 or page 60 in your packet. Just real quick, these are just a general snapshot of calls for service, and it just kind of gives you an idea over the last, I put the last 4 years in there, 2015 through 2018, and you'll see that in that time period, our low was 38,000 calls, and our high in 2015 was 41,726. This year we were kind of in the middle, 41,500 or so. And it's amazing how these numbers just seem to kind of trend within several thousand of each other, which when you're taking 41,000 calls a year, it's amazing that it stays that. Service is not, requirements for service have not spiked or dropped dramatically in that time. So that's an important thing for staffing and for other decisions that we may have to make in the future. Okay, page 70 in your packet, page 17 in the report. I just broke down some of the important things that I know you look at and the public looks at in terms of moving violations and really important to me, motor vehicle accidents. So you'll see that our motor vehicle accidents were down from 2017. We had about 1,000 in 2017. We dropped about 56 accidents. So the good news is that accidents, that was the first kind of significant drop in several years. So we're hoping that this is a trend, and that I hesitate to attribute it to any specific thing, but we have, through our strategic planning process over the last 3 years, we've worked to, we maintain a list of top accident areas, and we enlist a variety of strategies from engineering to a lot of different things, enforcement, and we concentrate a lot of our work in these areas to reduce these high accident areas. The unfortunate part of it is one area, one street drops, another one goes in. So it's kind of it's a never-ending process, but that's okay. That we tend to spend a lot of time looking at this data and trying to concentrate on enforcement efforts in those places. And then on the very next page, I just broke out a lot of the individual accident data, and this gets really deep in the report if you choose to look at it. But to highlight, pedestrian accidents dropped in 2018 by actually from 26 to 17 accidents. That's it's 9 people that didn't get hit by a vehicle. So to me, that's fairly significant and good for us. And hopefully we keep that going in that direction. Pedestrians injured, we had 24 injuries in 2017, and that's down to 17 in 2018. Again, hoping it's a trend that continues into the future, but it's going in the right direction. Bicyclist accidents were down significantly given the outcomes from 17 to 7. Again, good news. As were injuries with bicyclists, and we did not have any, thank goodness, any fatal accidents as we did the previous 2 years in 2017 and 2016.
Can I ask just a quick question on this? So
Yes.
if there's vehicles involved, if it's 2 cars, then does that count as 2?
Yes, so yeah, it'll count every vehicle, whether it's 1 vehicle involved or, up sometimes we'll have 4 vehicles involved.
And is a bike a vehicle or only a car or a truck is a vehicle?
Only a car.
Okay.
Yeah, a bike is recorded as a bicyclist, or in a pedestrian as a pedestrian with 1 vehicle. So I just wanted to highlight that. I didn't want to get too deep in it, just give you kind of the highlights that I thought that you might be interested in me bringing to your attention. I can answer any questions.
Well, I just want to start and just say thank you. This is really an exceptional document, and it's great to get it every year, and it feels like it keeps getting better, and just a real show of force of everything that the department is doing, and I'm just really so thankful to have you as the head of the department. And the recruitment section is also just, I think, a testament to how great, it's a great place to work. There were something like 800 applications for just a few spots, and we've gone through a period of transition in the department, and we've lost some real strong people, and although it's really hard to see people go, it's the new people coming on are really exciting, and the fact that we've been able to build diversity has been really terrific too, and it's just really gratifying to see you be able to shape the department that way with the values we want in our police force. I had, I'm going to defer to my colleagues for questions, and then I'll follow up with anything that doesn't get asked, but you want to start, Jenny?
Thanks. I echo everything Liz said. Thank you. And I also, before I ask the questions, this is a beautiful report. Maybe next year you could have it up on the screen, because we have quite a few people here.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that as I was going through
And
it.
you might as well show it off. But it is downloadable on the Princeton website for anybody who wants to see it. I had just a couple questions. For the calls for service, that's so many calls, I can't believe it. Is that not all 911 calls, or is it, what's the mix?
That includes, if you look in our monthly report, it includes every single thing that an officer responds to.
So even if they see, if
Yes.
somebody says, help,
Yes, that goes down as a call for, exactly. So it's not just 911, it could be, it could be something to do with anything. Anything that if somebody calls and needs an officer for help, or an officer sees something.
To get a cat down from a tree?
Exactly, it gets a number. So those numbers get, they get recorded obviously as a call for service.
So do you keep statistics by brand of car, or whatever they're called, the type of car? And you know why I'm asking this, because
it's kept for sure. It's all a
could
matter
you
of how we get it out, but it's definitely kept. Yes.
Because Eve told me about an interesting study that she heard about where they had a secret camera to watch people, and if they disobeyed the law at intersections, and like the more expensive cars were more likely to like roll through the stops and do bad things.
Interesting.
And there's like a, I was just wondering, there's like a stereotype that BMW drivers are jerks and things like that. You know, my husband has a BMW, by the way. But I mean, I'm just saying that I don't think they're jerks. But I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of curious about that. If that's in your experience, because
I don't know that it's been my experience. The interesting thing though about today's record keeping that we didn't have years ago is that even if we're not currently grabbing the data and reporting it, we can get it. It's all in there. It's a matter of having our software vendors just grab it for us. So like almost anything that you could think of, we can almost
I don't
get.
want any resources, but I was just curious. I thought maybe we can have like a proactive, instead, you know, the opposite of, I mean, brand profiling. But the other question I have is about, as you can guess what I'm going to ask about.
Speeders.
Yes. I've been talking to people around town, as you know, and we're working on this traffic calming project, and one of the things people have said to me, and I think it's a really good idea, and you probably have something to say about this, is that we don't really, a lot of times I say to you, why don't we have more speeding tickets? And I really push for more speeding tickets, but really warnings would be just as good. I think warnings end up deterring people from speeding, and we don't see the statistics about warnings, and I'm wondering, would it make it your life easier if you got a message from the council that we care about the speeding way more than we care about getting tickets issued?
It's been very important to me because I don't think they're competing interests, but there's two things that we always have to think about through enforcement. And we've tried to create a culture that uses appropriate discretion, compassionate discretion, but issues and enforces things in a way that helps safety. So I would argue that speeding and other moving violations greatly decrease our safety. So we do a lot of training in this area, and I talk about a lot with the officers about proactivity enforcement in terms of stopping and using discretion properly. So there's many reasons why people find themselves in situations stopped by a police officer. Some are avoidable, maybe some aren't. But it's interesting that, it's very important that, and when I speak to the officers, I never say you have to issue a ticket, because that's illegal. We can't say that. But I talk about the appropriate use of discretion. Somebody going, 40 miles an hour on a 25 is creating a hazard, and that has to be looked at maybe way more seriously than a person who has a bulb that didn't work. And we made almost, I believe, 9,000, and that's in the report, I think we made 9,000 motor vehicle stops last year. The overwhelming majority are warnings, and I get a lot of people that come in and say, oh gosh, your officers do nothing but issue us speeding tickets, and you're heavy-handed, and I also get people that say you don't issue enough. And the fact is that over almost, I guess, just short of 3/4 of our stops are warnings, and it just shows that we're out there stopping a lot of vehicles, and I hope to think that it's the proper use of discretion. I don't so much get tied into the summons number as I do the stop number. If I saw that our stops decreased by several hundred or 1,000 or more, there'd be a problem. I'd like to see that continue to stay where it is or even go up. But the summons, we used to just look at summonses. And summonses and arrests is what police work used to be centered around, and we found that was a failure in policing and led to a lot of issues. So we look at balance, but your point is right on the money. It's a balancing act, I think, but it's a cultural issue within the department, and I think that's helpful to hear from council that that's a thing that we're thinking about collectively.
Thanks.
Yep. Ms. Fraga and then Mr. Quinn.
Thank you. And I do want to, again, echo or triple echo, I don't know which one everyone's going to say, commend you on a great report, and also encourage members of the public who haven't seen it to go online. It's very, I especially like the graphics with community policing. But I do have some questions, follow-up questions. I also noted regarding the moving violations, as you noted, the majority of the stops, 72% were warnings.
Yes.
As opposed to 28% that resulted in summons. And I do appreciate hearing that that you would promote. I think you referred to it as compassionate
Discretion. Right.
discretion. But I am also interested as far as the warnings versus the summons. I know that you mentioned that you do track the data as far as the demographics, both in the summons and in the warnings. And I would like to see that in the reports, if you could.
Absolutely. I apologize because we've spoken about this before, and it's something we absolutely have, and it's an important statistic. And I think that was even that was a statistic used in the Policing Institute study. And
Okay.
they're the one, they actually drew that out, and we have it, and I should put it in the report, and I will.
Yeah, that would be very helpful to see. I think
Yes.
especially for there has been questions at how the discretion is applied, so it would be great to see it in the
Absolutely.
report. Another question I had was on, actually in regarding to the warnings versus the summons. Do you capture, is it possible to capture the data as to who's been warned already in the past and
Yes.
that they're stopped again?
Yeah, we capture that, so we can in several ways, but through we have two systems that capture that, and that's part of the that's definitely part of the application of discretion. So we can look at warnings locally and summonses locally. We can also look at them through a number of neighboring communities, and we also can look at the issuance of previous summonses throughout the state. So, that is a basis for the application of, enforcement versus warning. A habitual offender, if you will, that's habitually speeding through residential areas is a problem. So that would be one where we train people to, again, there's always situations and reasoning, but that would be one where kind of your discretion for most officers would trend towards more enforcement.
And they will have that data when they make that stop so that they can use that
Yes.
information? Great.
Yes.
Another follow-up question is not related to that. Social media.
Yes.
I'm very impressed. I actually follow the police department both on Facebook and Twitter, and I find it very helpful, especially when there's information on scam alerts and other safety warnings, and also when the police is asking for help in identifying suspects. I noticed in the report that it's mentioned that on social media that it's translated in 37 languages. Is that by the users themselves, the followers? Who translates it?
So I'm going to have to defer to our expert, Fred Williams. Sergeant Williams has brought our social media to a level that greatly exceeds my scope.
Okay.
He's just, I just can't say enough about him and what he's done. So
I
I
know, I
am
see.
going to, I've talked to him about it before, and I know he's talked to me about this.
Okay.
So I will get an answer to you and to the public about how that's done.
Okay.
And how
Well,
he
I'm
does it.
guessing because I know when I've seen a posting that is in a different language,
Right.
it gives you the option of translating it
Okay,
to the language
that
you
could be
prefer.
what it is, yeah.
So, but I would also, if possible, and if those postings are available, it's possible to do it in another language, such as
Yes.
Spanish.
Absolutely.
We could
I know
certainly
it's
help with
absolutely
doing
possible.
outreach on that.
Absolutely.
And the last one, and I know we spoke about it before, but I thought it was interesting for others who may have noted it. The numbers in the school detail in the report.
Yes.
That in 2018 there were 81,
Yes.
and then this year 18 in the
Yes.
same month as last year.
Yes.
And I wanted to know if you could.
That is 100% correlated to school crossings and also call volume during that time. But the school details are things that we'll assign our officer to. They're very important. They've been very successful. But they're a duty that comes second to school crossing is the number one thing. We have to have them all covered. 100% of the time, every day, every second that we're supposed to be there, we have to have somebody covering it. When the guards don't show up, or there's lots of reasons, or we lose guards, or we have to cover them, and that's gone up. It's fluctuated, but it's gone up exponentially recently, where we're covering. I want to say we covered in the thousands of school crossings this year, which is a problem. Yeah, we're working on it regularly, but that's why that number dropped so drastically.
Okay.
So, and also call volume will take, if we get a lot of motor vehicle accidents come in during the morning rush and in the afternoon when we would have officers at the school detail, so they have to be pulled away for that as well. But we, almost 100% of the time, we'll at least have our safe neighborhood officers at the schools, unless we're covering so many school crossing posts that everybody's on one. That does happen. That has happened, especially in some bad weather or early dismissals that weren't scheduled or things like that. Okay. But that's the direct correlation is mostly the crossings.
Okay. So hopefully if we get more consistent coverage in the crossings, then that would...
Yeah, and we've been historically, it's been, it's gotten real good at times, and then it drops off, and it could be just, if you think about it, even for a few months, if one or two or three are out for something, that times that by twice a day for 3 or 4 months, 2 months, and they start to add up quickly.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Councilman Quinn.
Your turn.
I defer to someone on the other side of the desk. Chief, first of all, echoing the thanks and appreciation for the report. I wanted to talk a little bit about the training section, which was, again, very impressive. There appear to be 60 to 80 training sessions that are made available to our officers, dealing with everything from autism shield training to de-escalation to domestic violence incidents, and check change control, which is for our officers for their stress, dealing with job stresses. What percentage of officers are availing themselves of the training?
So that's
I know that there are some that are required, and
yes,
but it appears that some are optional. And
so we do it 3 ways. Some are state mandated. Actually, we do it more than 3 ways. Some are state mandated, some are county mandated, some are departmentally mandated. We allow them, officers, to put in requests for specialized training that they would like, and some's optional. And so, for instance, a check change control is something that I pursued as part of our officer wellness initiative. I can't stress enough the fact that police officer involved suicide is the #1 killer of police officers. And we've recognized this early. We've experienced it in our history. And if you experience it once, you're never going to experience it again, if you can help it. And so we've made these initiatives that investing in our officers' wellness and physical fitness, mental health, and their overall wellness translates to great service. But that would be, some of those are mandated, but for instance, check change control is something that that officers opt into for blood pressure. We tend to experience high rates of high blood pressure. And you would be absolutely shocked at the number of officers that voluntarily, even young officers, that when I was 20-something, I don't think I thought about blood pressure. They are thinking about it today, and we're bringing attention to it, which is a great thing. I just went myself through mandatory departmental de-escalation training last week. So that was something that we do every year, but we sprung a refresher last week. So sometimes, it says we do it, we're mandated to do it once a year. We may get de-escalation training in various forms 3 times a year, in very various forms. So, yeah, it's our training, I think, is from a risk management standpoint and from a service standpoint, is probably our number one tool. And it can't be, it takes a lot of time, it takes money, it takes officers away from their duties sometimes, but the investment you hopefully get back exponentially.
And just to follow up, what is Israeli Krav Maga training?
That is the, we have we're lucky enough to have a local expert, by the way, in this that donates his time to us, but that is the prevailing self-defense method that's being used in law enforcement now. It's a defensive tactic that it's mostly types of holds and defense that limits the amount of injury. Everything we do with use of force is about limiting injury to the officer and the subject. So this is a type of a truly de-escalation tactic that is supposed to limit injuries to officers and to subjects that it's being used on. So there's a lot out there on it right now, and if you do a little research, you'll see that it's become very popular. We were lucky enough to have somebody that volunteered their time to us a decade ago in this. We were just luckily ahead of that curve as well. Now it's gone viral, if you will, throughout policing in the United States.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Cohen, did you want to, I know you had questions too. Okay. I don't even know what, I re-echo the echoing, but it is, it's just great to have you come to us with the report on what's going on the streets, how possible incidents of bias, how the police are dealing with that, and have you deliver that to us, and also with the idea that you're using these incidents to educate people, and that it just makes me so happy, because I think that's really what it's all about. And I can say from having done a ride-along a couple of months ago that it was, the officer I rode with was just an absolute model of how I would want to be treated, and I'm sure that he reflects the rest of the force.
Thank you.
But I do have a couple of questions. Sure. Sorry, computer turned itself off. One is sort of philosophical, I'll save that till the end. So I noticed that in both January and February, the meter violations were up substantially, 20% between January 2017 and January 2018. And it looked like, from my rough look, almost 50% from January 2018 to January 2019. Right. And I'm just wondering, is that just people adapting to the new system? Is there different enforcement? Or
I think there's 2 major issues. One was in 2017 we were understaffed. We had a full-time resignation. Person went on to another field. So for several months we were from 3 to 2 at that time. So that's pretty substantial on a monthly basis. Okay. As we went through our staffing, the staffing study for park enforcement, we did add some part-time employment in that area that helped fill areas that we weren't enforcing at all. And again, with parking, we speak completely about compliance. That's the whole goal of what our job is. So I think it's more of a staffing issue than it is in an attitude or a lack of compliance. I think we were not observing many violations for that time. So I think that was a outlier in a low way, as opposed to, I think now you're going to start to see it.
So when was the enforcement?
So I would start to compare and I'm just from off the top of my head, like Mayish.
Okay.
So I think from when you start comparing data from the middle of last year to what will be the middle of this year, you should start to see it starting to come back and evening out. More than that's the most drastic time, I think, was at the beginning of 2017.
Okay, thank you. And then I also noticed that our accidents with deer were up in 2018, even though what I'm hearing from the animal control officers, it was a really successful year for the deer hunt. And so are there more accidents? Is the reporting better? Are there just more cars? Do you have any ideas?
I don't. It's really odd because it's completely it's inverse to what it should be. It should in 2017, I believe the deer management program was low compared to where it is this year, but yet the accident statistics it's not reporting. We do experience things that they're just anomalies and they don't match up from year to year, and that would be one that I find that is just not maybe consistent to what you would think it is. It's kind of unpredictable. There are people that will hit a deer and have minor damage and not report it, and others will have minor damage and report it. So it could be self-reporting, but not enough to really. I think it's kind of just something that we look at, and I can't really put a specific reason to why it drops or goes up.
Okay. I was hoping you had a theory, but okay. Now for the philosophical question, which is, I know there's more of an effort in the community that's concerned with traffic and complete streets to refer to motor vehicle interactions as crashes rather than accidents.
Yes, this is true.
And maybe this has come up before and I wasn't paying attention, so if so, please give this a very brief answer. But I'm wondering, are these terms mandated by the state, or is...
Yes.
Tell me.
So,
Okay.
just like when I got up to say the pledge, I still look in that corner. Because I expect the flag to be there, I still refer to them as accidents. They're crashes. And that is that was a term, actually, the first time I encountered it was from the state. Gosh, a handful of years ago, that changed. As I came up through the ranks, it was always a motor vehicle accident. They're not accidents always. There's reasons behind them, and it's actually it's a very important term, and I, of all people, should be very cognizant of my terminology when I say that. But I still say accidents, and you're correct, or crashes, and that's a very important piece of the culture when dealing with this issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a few comments. First of all, Chief, would like to commend you on your efforts to make the force demographically more reflect the community they serve, and I think you've been doing a great job of doing that. I'd also like to commend you on your use of technology to help be proactive about making sure we have equity in policing. A few comments. These are just more like clarifications. I guess for the benefit of the public. The data we're seeing here are just for the Princeton Police Department, so it doesn't reflect data from the university police, right? All right.
The university, may not, because there's certain things that are mandated. So uniform crime report, for instance, there's mandates, but not all. Use of force is mandated. Internal affairs is mandated. So you would see their numbers separate with those things. They have to report those things, but we're not mandated to report many of these things. So, like, for instance, the Attorney General mandated internal affairs reports that you see here get put on our website every quarter. That's got to go public, which is a great thing. We never did that before. As a matter of fact, it was privileged in the past. So that's a great thing. But, right, these numbers reflect our encounters, and they're not all mandates. So from department to department, you won't see these same types of things.
And I presume that would also stretch, let's say if we use mutual aid, like let's say New Jersey State Police,
yes,
or the prosecutor's detective's office or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
And I know the prosecutor's office does their own annual report that reflect our numbers in there.
Right. And just one question on the stats here. I noticed for DWIRS in 2018, they spiked tremendously.
Yeah, they
in
actually
2017, even though they went down dramatically in 2016. I'm not sure what was happening in 2018.
They actually went down dramatically, and I was looking at that this year. They went down dramatically in dramatically last year, and I tried to attribute it to a couple things. The first thing I was hoping was designated drivers, ride sharing, services, taxis that were being used more in education. I have noticed in my career, the incidence of DWI from my observations in Princeton, dropped substantially. The other thing you always have to look at is enforcement. Is there a reason? DWI, except for accidents, is a very proactive event. We assign patrols just to DWI enforcement at times. And in looking at staffing sometimes, when you go to, we were, due to injuries and different things, and that, it wasn't huge, but it might have been enough that we weren't able to assign specific officers to DWI enforcement, and that would drop that number substantially. But it's odd that it came right back up in 2018 from 2017. Right. So something that we actually have to dig into that and we will put a reason to that. There's a reason for it, or several. So that's something that I highlighted. That was definitely a good observation on your part.
Thanks.
Yes. Let's see. So I also forgot to commend you at the top just about the Detective Bureau, and it seems like they've been just really successful at working not just internally but with partners and other agencies, and it just is a theme that flows through the report of all the partnerships that you've made, that you can really see it, the benefit of that just in that one area of being able to have a successful Detective Bureau to bring cases to a close.
Thank you, and those partnerships are so important, and we've dedicated a lot of time and effort to forming these partnerships, sharing resources and getting resources. One thing I wanted to point out about the Detective Bureau, and you'll find it if you go on any annual report or if you go on UCR statistics, you will find, and I think this is important for the public, that closure rate of investigations by arrest, meaning solved crimes, you probably look at this and would be stunned at how low it is. And the important part about that is that we rely on the public so much for help. And from a detective and investigative standpoint, it's so paramount to our investigations. And I always point that out, and a lot of people say, I can't believe how low the closure rate is on investigations. Ours is actually a little bit higher than the national average. Many cases that don't have leads don't get solved. And some are serious, really serious crimes that don't get solved. And often there are people that have information or have an answer that don't come forward. It could be for a variety of reasons. It could be fear of us. We're always cognizant of that going to the police is not comfortable or could get them in trouble. So we try to really, and I should have highlighted that earlier, get that out to the public. That's a really partnerships with other law enforcement, but the public as important or most important to solving these crimes.
And the one thing, I wasn't sure if I was able to sort of see this in the data here, but one of the things we've been talking about over the past several months is the fire department, and one of the big drains on the fire department are the false alarms.
Yes.
So we worked with you in redoing the ordinance for false alarms, and I think it'd be interesting to council to get a report on just if you can do the stats of have we seen a decrease in false alarms, especially the ones that were the repeat offenders.
I have that, and I'll actually, it's very easy. I'll compare, I can get that for you. I'll have it in my next report.
That'd be great. And it doesn't have to be something that is monthly. It could just be just a touch point of how are we doing with that.
Absolutely.
And do we need to revisit the ordinance in any way?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. If there's no more questions for the chief, then thank you very much. And then we'll continue with council reports, and I'll start again on my right with Ms. Niedergang.
Just a couple of brief notes from animal control. The spring rabies clinic was held at the end of March, and 77 cats and dogs were vaccinated, and SAVE also microchipped 10 animals. There was a request that the ability to license dogs on the spot be available there, so at the next clinic we'll make sure we have forms so people can license their dogs. As some of you may know, there's a big push to get dogs licensed so that if a dog is lost or if there's a concern about rabies, that we can trace the dog to his or her owner. And just a note, and this can pick up a little bit from the Facebook page of police Facebook page, that our animal control officer Jim Ferry rescued a baby fox maybe a week or so ago, and if you go on the Princeton Police Department webpage, you will find some very adorable photos of this little guy being rescued and was sent to Mercer Wildlife Refuge, where he or she, I don't remember, is recovering well. So that just warmed my heart, so I had to share that with you. Thank you.
Just a quick report on my kickoff meeting, actually, with Drew, I'm blanking out on his last name, our new director of the PSRC, last week as council liaison to PSRC. And of note was a conversation about helping the demographic that uses PSRC to understand the parking system better and the parking application, and in particular scheduling some sessions where we do some education there. And I wanted to give an open invitation to members of council to participate actually in that training. I think it's a great opportunity for us to get feedback from the users of the PSRC about how the parking system's affecting them, as well as other things. So let me know if you're interested in participating. And then the second thing I want to mention is, really should have come in announcements, but PSRC is holding their spring fundraiser on Saturday, May 4th in the evening. Moroccan crazy night out or something like that. So I encourage everybody to come out for that. It'll be a lot of fun. You can sign up for it on their website. Sure. Yeah. So the Climate Action Plan is gone live online. It's in a 6-week period, I believe, of receiving comment from anyone in the community. So please spread the word that it's available. They're all talking about how they're sure they're going to be getting tons of feedback. I'm not quite so, I don't know if it's pessimistic or optimistic to think that they're going to get lots of feedback, but they do want feedback because they want this this plan to really have community buy-in and support. So please take a look and share your thoughts.
I just had a couple reports. The first was there was a community meeting a couple weeks ago about the new fueling station, and several council members were there, and we heard from the immediate neighbors pretty strongly. And we had discussed this at our last meeting, but I wanted to get an official sense of council about removing the canopy, and to see if there would be support in giving administration that direction. So I'm seeing a couple nods.
My understanding also is that
Sure, I support
it could be reused at the River Road facility. There is a site that could use a canopy.
My understanding is that that cannot be promised because of how it needs to be taken down, but I think
okay.
we can ask that if that's possible, that be done.
So I'm not sure if the way you asked this question, the answer was apparent to my question, but I'm certainly in favor of replacing it. I do think, and one of the items on our agenda tonight is to approve funding for Looney Rick's Kiss to look at design options for that location, correct?
That was already done.
Oh, they already did the design work, okay. I guess it seems to me that a creative design solution could satisfy the neighbors, and that there are environmental and other advantages to having some kind of cover there. So I'm not entirely supportive of just getting rid of it, but I'm happy to be outvoted.
Okay. I will say that was attempted at the meeting. There were members of, I don't think that PEC took a vote on it, but there were sort of prominent voices from the Environmental Commission who reiterated that there was not a significant environmental requirement for it. And I think there were some creative screening designs presented as well. But it's a difficult thing to screen because of its size. So it was, yeah. I feel like there was a good honest attempt to do that, but it was not.
But it wasn't,
from my perspective, it
wasn't looking at alternative designs for the canopy. It was just looking at how to either hide the canopy or take it down.
It was different. There were some of them where there was a different roof.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there are some concerns, but everybody else seems to be nodding their head. Is that okay? Is that enough to move forward? Okay. Do you need us to vote, or do you just?
We'll be coming back to council with the final, once we get the final quote for what the cost will be.
Okay.
And
Mark,
I'm sorry. I wonder if we could address the environmental issues. I think that there isn't consensus. I supported originally based on the runoff of fuel, and we did have to do a cleanup, an environmental cleanup of the site before we handed it over to PFARS. And so if there are ways somewhere between a huge canopy and the 90 umbrellas that one of the neighbors suggested, where we could limit the amount of the fuel that spills from it running into the green buffering that we're planning for the site anyway, depending upon how high. I'd like us to explore that, not something that's as large and ominous, and also the lighting was the other concern, that it seemed to be overlit for evening use.
Mayor, I just want to add that the members of the Environmental Commission were concerned about the runoff, regardless of whether or not there's a top or a canopy. So, you know, obviously gas is going to be spilled, and so they did put in a pitch for some kind of accounting for the whatever is going to be spilled, again, whether or not the canopy is there.
I guess I just want to point out that one other potential benefit of having a canopy of some kind is longevity of the equipment. So if it's protected from the elements, it may last longer. So even if there's not a runoff implication, there may be other decent reasons to have a cover.
Well, I also want to acknowledge that the cover protects the people who are driving and filling it up in bad weather, and so I want to acknowledge to the staff that I understand that we're imposing I mean, a little bit of hardship on them. And I feel like it's a hard thing to do, and but it was so obtrusive that I felt like in this case we should take it down. And I feel but I do want to acknowledge that the employees are going to not have as, you know, it was going to be a nice amenity for them, and now they're not going to have it.
I just, I wonder whether if the concern is protecting the longevity of the equipment, if there could be a canopy to cover the equipment, as opposed to the whole big canopy. And
it's because it has to be so high for the truck, for the big trucks, that any canopy has to be really high.
Well, I meant the equipment, the fueling station. Well,
There will have to be some
I don't mean it for it
modifications
to
just
be
for that.
wide.
There will have to be some modifications to ensure that the equipment is protected. It won't be a canopy, and that's one of the things as they're going to design, they'll figure out how we do that.
Okay. And the second question I had was, as far as runoff, I wonder whether, regardless of whether there's a canopy or not, when it rains, depending, I don't know if the ground is sloped or not, that the rain would wash away whatever spilled fuel there is, whether there's a canopy or not. So.
Yeah, I was thinking something very similar. I was just wondering if I know we had a wonderful meeting a few weeks ago. I was just wondering from a design perspective if we've done enough to consider different options. It seems to be a consensus that we don't want the humongous canopy there. I'm just wondering if we've sufficiently considered what viable alternatives there are as far as design and also usefulness is concerned. I mean, some of the things that just have crossed my mind, you know, maybe something not as big, but something maybe transparent, so it's not obviously seen, so that can also protect, as Council President Krav said, to protect the employees who are actually pumping gas. I echo Councilwoman Fraga's comments that even, you know, if a canopy is there or not, and there's spill, there's something environmentally that needs to be done to deal with the spillage. So canopy or not, maybe there's other alternatives for us to look at on that side. And I'll end it with just a thought or something, my own little research, so to speak. There are contractors out there who do camouflaging of essential equipment. You see it for the military, you see it for cell phone towers, et cetera. Maybe you want to look at maybe something that makes it look more neighborly, but also has some useful effect.
Okay, so I still think that I'm hearing consensus that we should take it down.
Yes.
And then I think council's open to other ideas addressing some of the issues that the canopy was initially designed to address.
An invisible canopy would be perfect.
Well, a transparent one
Okay.
is halfway there.
All right, and then the other report I had was just to let council know, I've been in a very small working group with the chief and with Deanna Stockton, and Lisa Maddox joined us at our last meeting looking at tour buses. And we essentially have a tour bus program in place now where tour buses are supposed to load and unload in the bus stops on Nassau Street and then go down to Lower Alexander. And more or less it is working, but we want to be able to give the police the tools in order to actually enforce it. So Lisa Maddox is helping us with what our abilities in terms of that would be, and we're hoping to bring some ordinances back to council. And season, I think, starts probably now, and it's going to ramp up over the next month. So we know we want to try to get something in place soon for this season. All right, and are there any further staff reports? Nope. Okay. I just I saw that there was this sheet that I didn't see earlier. is Veronica Cardin still here? Did you want to speak on, okay, sorry, I didn't, did you, so why don't you come and we'll reopen public comment if you want to speak on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Council and Mayor. So this is regarding Princeton Community TV.
Can you make sure you're just speaking directly in the microphone so we can hear you?
So do you hear me now? Okay. So my name is Veronique Cardon, and I'm a nutritionist and owner of a business in Princeton. I've been in business since 2014. And I'm a member of Princeton Community TV. I have a show that I started last year about healthy lifestyle. And its goal is to help people understand how can their health be impacted in negative and positive ways. I have multiple guests and experts, doctors, healers, and so forth. And I'm here to support Princeton Community TV. I was asked to come here by the station, and I will give you 3 reasons why I hope you will keep supporting Princeton Community TV. Number 1, the Princeton Community TV is a wonderful resource that allows small Princeton businesses and small practitioners like me to share educational videos and interviews at a reasonable cost. Otherwise, these people like me who have small budgets will not be able to share their voices and the free support that themselves give to the community through those videos and shows. And if we stop supporting the TV, you will literally shut up lesser affluent people if and when there is no funding, because I think those people have no other way to fund their program. I mean, doing a video is $300, $500 a piece. So that's my first reason. The second one is I've been enough at the Princeton Community TV to tell you that they're scrappy. It's not a deluxe studio. It's in the cave. We all work, including the producers. We set up the stage. We do all those things. So I don't think that there is a lot of money spent there in a, frivolous way. And they also contribute to educating the community with podcasting and so forth. And lastly, it gives an audience and it gives awareness to the community through education. And it supports artists, it supports healers, doctors, you name it. People who are invited get a way to raise their own awareness and visibility in Princeton and outside Princeton. Thank you. Oops.
Thank you very much. So for those people who don't know, Princeton Community TV has been receiving a significant sum of money from the municipality, dating back from, they used to be a municipal department, then they spun off to become a nonprofit, but that funding stream continued. Under their last contract, the funding was gradually getting reduced, but they still receive a significant amount from the town, $230,000 last year. And most communities surrounding us use the funds that come in through cable franchise fees to help offset the property tax burden to their residents. And we're in discussions right now with Princeton Community TV. We appreciate the work that they do, but we have a lot of really wonderful nonprofits in this community, and the municipality does not give grants to nonprofits. I see members of the Arts Council here. There's lots of really great groups. We want to have a relationship with PCTV like we do with our other nonprofits, like the Princeton Senior Resource Center, like Sustainable Princeton, where for the services that are provided for the municipality, we're happy to pay for those, but we can't be in the business of supporting all of our nonprofits. That's what private fundraising is for. So we've tried to have that conversation with other people at the station, and we're hoping we can get to an agreement so we can all move forward.
Well, I also want to underscore that One of the things that I've learned during this is that a lot of the volunteers at the station are from other towns that don't have their own station, and so it's kind of ironic that we're continuing to fund this, so other people who are getting the tax break from their own municipalities are being subsidized by the Princeton taxpayers. So I really have seen this as being responsible to our own taxpayers.
I agree. Yeah, and one of the suggestions to PCTV, given that they've become a regional TV station, is to get funding from some of the other towns that are also receiving these cable franchise fees to make it fairer for Princeton residents. So anyway, any message of that you can take back would be helpful. Okay, so I'm going to close public comment again, and we will move on to just drawing people's attention to a letter we received from the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee about parking, largely in response to another piece of correspondence we had gotten from some merchants and the Merchants Association, and this is so just that it goes in the record and people can take a look at it. And now we come to the ordinance. Did anybody want to say anything about the correspondence? Or I think it speaks for itself. Okay. We can move on to the ordinance public hearings for tonight. The first one is Ordinance 2019-2, an ordinance by Princeton eliminating proportional increase in floor area ratio on undersized lots and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this is the second or third public hearing now we've had on this ordinance, so all of the testimony that's been made in prior meetings is also part of this record. We will open up the public hearing in a minute, but just as an introductory statement, this was originally brought forward because we thought this was going to be an easy lift, and I think it's become more complex and complicated as we've gotten into this than we first anticipated. So we've collected a lot of data. I think that there's a desire for even more data before people necessarily have a comfort level in moving forward. And I think one of the things that council is going to need to decide is that where we want to spend our time, given we put this forward because we thought it was sort of low-hanging fruit, easy lift, because it does take time away from some of the other projects on our priority list for this year, and one of the prime things on the list is the harmonization of the Township and Borough Code, which could potentially lead to a more comprehensive solution to the problem this is trying to address. So I don't know if we want to have a discussion about that right now, if we want to open up the public hearing and then bring it back, but yeah, Ms. Miller?
Right. I mean, I support tabling this ordinance. I'm just throwing that out there so that the public knows what. I don't know if the other council members are feeling that way. Just before the comments start, I wanted to get that out there.
Yeah.
Yep, Mr. Quinn.
Mayor, yeah, I also support the. I know it wasn't made as a motion, but the need to table. I went back and looked at the Zoning Board of Adjustments annual report that included this recommendation as recommendation number 2, and recommendation number 1 was the most immediate recommendation is the merger of the former township and borough land use ordinances. And I share the concern of those who feel that getting enough data in order to make a totally informed decision on one zoning board recommendation takes too much time away from the number 1 recommendation, which is the harmonization of the land use code. So,
okay. So before we vote on tabling, I would like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. If anybody would like to speak to it at this point who hasn't already spoken during former public hearings or had something additional to add. If you just want to come up to the microphone. And I just, for people who haven't been following this, I just should give like a brief explanation of what this is about. So essentially in Princeton, there's the FAR, like all other communities, floor area ratio, which restricts how large a home you can build based on the size of your lot. And in Princeton, one of the sort of unusual things we have is there are a lot of homes that are on lots that are smaller than what the zoning requires. So if you are on such a lot where it's smaller than what's required by the zone, you get a bonus. So you can actually build proportionally a larger home than that ratio would be if you were in compliance with the zone. And as a result, there's been some problems that the zoning board has called to our attention. So the proposal is to eliminate that bonus for all the undersized lots in town. That's what the ordinance calls for. Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off before you started.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Paul Shore, 299 Hamilton Avenue. Two quick thoughts. One, this is my first time reading what was there, and the existing FAR ordinance, as it's outlined in the document that was given out, has underlined both what appears to be those portions that are to be deleted as well as those portions that are amended. So it was a little confusing as to what is being deleted and what isn't being deleted. Secondly, the mathematics are not clear because you're adding 1 in the existing ordinance, and I'm not clear if in fact that's 1% or 1 square foot. So there's a little bit of ambiguity that I'm sure people who are used to doing this are totally comfortable with. I couldn't understand it at all. The third thing is that in terms of objectives, in terms of what the floor area ratio is attempting to preserve, not just, and this goes back to a point about the runoff, I appreciated hearing that, because what I'm personally learning through the expansion of 293 Hamilton Avenue is that while the land in the front of the building along the street is counted as part of the lot, the land in the rear, which is at a distinctly different elevation, and in a way water runs off to our property, is a complicating factor in terms of how the additional square footage, if it's, I would say, a larger footprint as opposed to a taller elevation, that impacts the runoff, which goes to adjoining lots. And in very few instances, I'm learning, does the grading plan address some of these inconsistencies between adjoining lots that may be created as is being created right now at 293 Hamilton Avenue. So yes, and that's one unintended consequence of dealing with runoff from a lot if in fact the footprint gets larger.
Wait, hold on, because we want to make sure you're getting recorded. We might need to get you a new mic.
Battery.
Sometimes the battery dies.
I feel like I've just been made bionic. A new vocal cord. So the second unintended consequence is that as a tear down and the availability of affordable housing in our particular neighborhood will be decreased as the taxes get increased, as I noted through the compliance plan process, the additional sales to assessed value ratios drop because the sales have maybe it's the other way around, assessed value to sales ratio drop. So that means that the affordability of the homes has now become less, and families which are now able to purchase homes in an area such as ours may not be able to do so, which has the unintended consequence of allowing less, although it may seem like more taxes, but less coverage for bond issues related to schools. So we have several unintended consequences that at least I'm beginning to think about, never thought about them before. And would only ask council, what does it mean to table? Does that mean forever? For how long?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think your comments help to illustrate why this is more complex than we originally thought starting this. Essentially what tabling is to say we're going to set this ordinance aside for the moment, and at some point we might bring it back, but we don't know enough to put a date on when we would bring it back. Because the main priority is the harmonization of the borough and township code, that would come first. And I'm going to ask Mr. DeShield in a minute sort of when we can expect that to fully come to council and have that complete. But as part of that process, we'll be looking at the boundaries of some of the existing zones and taking advantage of the fact that we're not now consolidated. So a good example is just the neighborhood right next to us, Witherspoon Jackson. That's two zones, and one's in the former borough, one's in the former township. And do we want to make that one zone, for example? And there might be other places in town where maybe there'd be a smaller zone cut out of a neighborhood to better reflect the homes that are there. So I think that would be the direction to staff in terms of what is the immediate priority. Oh, anybody else want to speak? Just come to the mic.
It's off again. Yeah. I think we lost it again.
You know what, does that one work? Yeah, I would just, if you just come to the table and sit, and hopefully they can get you on camera also.
Oh, okay. That would be bad. Hi, Joseph Weiss. I live on Lee Avenue in the Jackson-Witherspoon neighborhood, and I'm really glad to hear that you're reconsidering this ordinance, because I do think and I came prepared to speak against it, mainly for, well, two reasons. One, the unintended consequences that when you apply these town-wide fixes to the zoning, it really does have a lot of unintended consequences to various neighborhoods, and in particular the Jackson-Witherspoon neighborhood, where for, all the time I've lived there, which is 26 years, the zoning rules that are in place, and Mayor, you mentioned there's actually two zone districts there that cut through the neighborhood, but both of the zone districts are completely disconnected from the reality, the physical reality of the neighborhood. And in fact, this particular fix with eliminating the proportional FAR would really place a great burden on a lot of people in that neighborhood, because any minor improvement that would increase maybe even 20 feet the size of their floor area would require them to get a variance. So I'm glad that you're reconsidering. And I want to encourage you to look at this more holistically, and as you indicated, make it a priority to combine the former borough and township zoning. So thank you for that. The last thing I want to say is I think in the way that, and this is with all due respect, the way people are discussing some of these issues and the language that's being used tends to kind of create villains. And so the term tear down has just become like a dirty word in town. And I don't think that should be the case. I don't think that's fair, because I think there's been a lot of thoughtful homes that have been built that replaced older homes that needed to be replaced. And I think that's part of the lifeblood of a living community, is to have an, almost like a living, breathing thing that is constantly changing. So I don't think it's wise to vilify tear downs. Yes, I might, and everyone has an opinion about some things that get built that seem to be, in poor taste, or maybe too large, or seem to be too large for the site. But I don't think it's a good idea to universally condemn that type of change. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Whoever wants to speak is going to have to come. Oh, we have a mic that works. Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
For now.
I can speak loud. Chip Kreider, Bank Street. Look, we all know what the problem is. There are two real issues. Is once we get a tear down in a neighborhood and it's never rebuilt at the same price. It's always probably double. The people who are taking the money are the ones that run, and the people who are paying the price are those of us that are left. Why do we have to start paying firemen? Because we've driven out the people who used to be the firemen. As I said before, this is an emergency brake. Put it on. Make it last for 2 years. Get the other thing harmonized, repeal it, or have it expire. If your house is on fire and you call the fire department, they don't say, well, we could really put this fire out better with the new truck, but it's not here yet. So, do it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this?
James Christie, Lee Avenue. I would just like to reiterate what most of what Joseph had to say. I also live on Lee Avenue. I just think there's a lot of people that were very concerned that this was being done in a way that didn't reflect all of the different types of neighborhoods where these kinds of issues are happening, and there's just a whole lot of people that have no plans on tearing down their house that this could affect in a day-to-day way. And it just seems to me that something that it's really important when initiate something like this, that there be flexibility, and this seems like it's not coming at things with flexibility. And I would just say, kind of like stepping back, it's one of those things where I'm always, online when you have discussions about politics and things, there's a lot of anti-government feeling that it frustrates me so much. You people, just hearing you respond to the police department, it's great. It's really great what you guys are doing. This is the kind of issue that makes people mad at the government, that they're taking control of the concept of what they can do with their house. It's very personal, right? And so it's just something to tread very carefully on, because I feel like I want to support my community, and I think the big picture reasons for it make a lot of sense, but the details of how it's done they really matter. So bravo on waiting for the data.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Leighton Newland, 230 Birch Avenue. I came here tonight in support of my good friend and neighbor, Joseph Hobart Weiss. And I came up to the microphone tonight being a man of my word, to show Joseph, the mayor and council, and those gathered here, that I did keep my word. And I just want to say I agree with what he said. But I also want to go a little bit further. Joseph made a comment about tear downs, and I agree, because Joseph lives in a home that he and his wife built. He's an architect and designer, and he is an outlier. The house he built on Lee Avenue works beautifully, and it fits the neighborhood, but he's an outlier. and not all tear downs fit the neighborhood. So while I came up to agree with him on tear downs, some of them are good, some of them are not good. And the ones that are not good are the ones that increase the taxes and the property values in the neighborhood of longtime homeowners who no longer can afford their homes and have to sell. But I also came here to share some good news with you tonight. We have now 8 people, and we're going to grow to approximately 20 individuals in Princeton across economic boundaries and diverse ethnicities who are going to join a lawsuit that will be headed by Bruce Afrin, the litigator who brought Princeton University to their knees with regard to his challenge to them being not a not-for-profit. And we will be hopefully going into litigation where it will be, I would say, earth-shattering and really something special if we are, if we can win. And property values for longtime homeowners in the state of New Jersey who have been here a long time, who are senior citizens, when their amount of money, their income drops to fixed income, but like we have in Witherspoon, Jackson, and on Dempsey and many other neighborhoods in Princeton, the tear downs promote increase in property taxes and increase in land values, forcing people to lose their homes. Our litigation would have the property values of longtime homeowners tied to their income and not the value of their homes, which I'm sure you can understand would be something very significant, not just for New Jersey, but for the United States of America in general. So I just wanted to announce that. Keep an eye out. We'll be soliciting people, and this could be something very significant, not just for the state of New Jersey, but for Princeton as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing?
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Sarah Torian, and I live at 56 Lee Avenue and have for almost 8 years. And I shared a little bit about my experience in my home at the meeting back in February. We just wanted to reiterate the fact that if you take away the home that was built on our property 100 years ago would exceed the limits by 200 square feet. So I think we need to think about the communities that were built here, these historic neighborhoods, and develop zones and ordinances that reflect those rather than trying to do cookie cutter approaches. And so I want to thank you for kind of seemingly agreeing to that by deciding or signaling that you're going to decide to table it. But just wanted to ask about something that was discussed at the last meeting. I listened to the recording and it seemed to be a readiness to do a little bit more research and to dig deeper into understanding what are some of the positive consequences and what would be some of the negative consequences by passing this ordinance. And some of the data that Councilmember Quinn and Councilmember Cohen gathered before the last meeting, they shared with me, and it showed that this might not be the best approach. But there seemed to be that more research was going to be taking place. People talked about sharing that research, posting it for everybody to see on the council or on the town website in the neighborhood initiative section, and I looked for it and I didn't see anything posted even as recently as yesterday morning. And so just wanted to inquire about whether or not additional research was done since the March 25th meeting, and if and when and how that data and information will be shared with the public so that we can all continue this conversation and figure out what is the best approach moving forward.
Right, so that was one of the reasons I said what I said at the top, is that it has been more complex than we thought, and even getting that data has been more complex. A lot of the requests had to do with additions, and I think it was eye-opening for a lot of us just in terms of how we organize that material. It's not on the same system, and so it requires going into each individual record, and it's going to be a significant amount of staff time. And so this was the sort of moment where we had to decide, do we want to spend 100 hours collecting this data, because that's 100 hours we're not spending on harmonization work. So we're not sitting on anything that's explosive. It's more just, I think, just the, there's been some volunteers among council people to continue to work on this, and I think it makes sense, but we just want to be careful how we're devoting our resources, and it will be something that council needs to decide tonight about what direction we want to go in and how we want us to allocate those resources. Mr. Cohen?
Would it be possible for what has been collected by the volunteer time, whatever, to be shared in a public manner?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, when I learned that we weren't going to have the staff report relating to additions in time for this meeting, I did make a last-minute request to the building department just to get a sense for how many additions are done on an annual basis, to get a sense of the scale of that versus the scale, the numbers of new houses that go up for teardowns. It's about twice as many. So we've been having about 25 to 30 teardowns with new construction a year over the last 3 years, and about 75 or so additions over that same time period. I haven't had a chance yet to drill down and find out how many of those are on non-conforming lots and how many of them utilize the proportional FAR, but I'm curious for my own edification, so I'm going to follow up on that.
Good evening. My name is Marina Rubina, 28 Quarry Street, and thank you so much for, over the past 2 months, the amount of creative energy and research and interest that I think went into looking into this has been incredible. And I'm personally very grateful, and I hope even if this ordinance is tabled, we don't feel that that was a wasted effort, that we've all learned so much by doing this together that we now have a much deeper understanding of the complexity. Hopefully you would agree. And to continue on Joseph's point of the vilification, I think there has also been a vilification of local professionals in this town, which partly led down this road because of how Princeton interprets conflict of interest. It's not my job to know whether that's right or wrong. We have no currently practicing in town professionals on our zoning board or our planning board, and that perspective is not part of the discussion of these new ordinances. So as you plan future changes or as you rework on this ordinance, we have an organization or a board, site plan review advisory board. It's purely an advisory board full of professionals who are ready and willing to help review, comment, explain, support, come to meetings. And for example, SPRAB hasn't met for like 6 months in the beginning, up until the last meeting. So it's another source of information, or as a sounding board, as a way of, as ideas come up, to help you sort of review and flag issues. It's not a board that decides. But I think partly because local professionals has been so vilified, that opinion was never brought as part of this. And I also think that, as we know, we in Princeton, and Charles is a wonderful example, we have so much capacity to do data mining that if the public was brought in as part of, what is that committee called? Zoning revision, ZARC, as sort of as that process, possibly, maybe more volunteers would step up earlier to do the research and analysis and sort of assign homework. Oh, we need this, this, this. Maybe that would help. But thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that I am sorry if anybody has felt vilified through this process. I think that the amount of building activity in the town has created a lot of concern and a lot of fear among the people living here. And so I don't think the intention is to vilify. I think we're trying to have a community conversation about a lot of really significant changes that are happening. And a lot of those changes are having negative impacts on different neighborhoods. So I think that's the conversation. And you go out, I mean, we all have people come up to us. It's one of the main topics of conversation that are of concern to people, and it's something that it's important that we address. But I agree with you. We don't want to be vilifying people. I think we just need to have an honest conversation about the effects of what's happening. And some of that can be positive, but I think a lot of it can be negative as well, and that's what we're trying to address. And I said before, zoning is a really rough instrument, so you're never going to get it completely right. It's impossible to get it completely right because everybody's property is different, and that's why we have a zoning board. So you try to get the ordinances as best you can get them, and then you have that outlet for people who have an exception for whatever reason and need to plead their case there. All right, is there anybody else who'd like to speak while we still have the public hearing open? Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing then and bring it back to council and see if Ms. Krummeler wants to make a formal motion to table the ordinance.
Sure, motion to table.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Quinn. Is there any discussion further discussion from council? Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just want to say that the connection between harmonizing the zoning ordinance between the borough and the township and this proportional FAR ordinance is actually not just a question of prioritizing the harmonization, at least not in my mind, but it's also the fact that the two really are tied together, that the harm that citizens were concerned about coming from the elimination of the proportional FAR was real, but can largely be mitigated by getting the zones corrected. So, you know, to use very specific examples, we heard a lot about how Western Way and Southern Way, the lots are all undersized and the houses are all up to the max or even above the max using the proportional FAR. There are other neighborhoods like Wheatsheaf Lane where the lots are all undersized, but the houses are all very modest and they're all complying. So we're going to treat those kinds of neighborhoods differently once we look carefully at the zone boundaries and also the zone regulations, the zone bulk requirements. And once we address that, I still think there may be a use for this ordinance to get rid of the proportional FAR, because I think there will always be some lots that don't need and shouldn't have. There'll more be outliers within their zones rather than parts of neighborhoods that are consistently undersized. But I just wanted to make that connection clear in my mind, that it was too much to ask of the citizens to say, well, we're going to do the proportional FAR first, but trust us, we're going to get the zoning right and make it good for all of you. We need to do them together.
And also, before you vote, Mark, can I just ask if you could give us a sense of what the timeline would be for those harmonization ordinances?
Yes. The harmonization ordinance, we expect those to be done by the first quarter of 2020. We should have everything finished, but it will be late in that year. So I don't see us actually finishing for the end of the year. We probably would end up doing the introductions in the first quarter of 2020.
And do you see those all coming in one big fail swoop, or are we going to have pieces of it over the course of this year?
I'm looking at Michael. I don't know if it's going to be a comprehensive or we'll have a number of smaller
It'll
ordinances.
probably be introduced, I would think it'd be introduced in sections, but it'll probably be done as a, I mean, we're going to try to get through the whole thing. We might try to explain like residential sections, zones and that sort of thing, the way it's presented, because it's a lot. It's a lot
And they would go to ZARC first?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a motion to table and a second. If there's no further... Oh,
I'm sorry. I just did want to comment that to kind of echo Marina, I think this is an example of the system working. We proposed something that to me sounded good initially, and then the more I learned about it, the more concerns I had. So many people, I think, in the town spent so much time with me and with other members of council as well. So although we didn't, and I think what we hoped to achieve through the ordinance was not going to be achieved through the ordinance. So I think it's good that we're tabling it. But again, I think that we've all learned something through this process, or at least I have. So I appreciate having gone through it. So.
That's well said. And I also wanted to just say that, you know, sometimes we can get criticized for, you know, paralysis by analysis, and I don't think that is what is happening here. You know, I think that the, like what everybody has said, I think taking a step back and saying, is there a better way to do this, and sort of learning from this experience is a smart way to go. So if there's no more comments, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Okay, so this ordinance has been tabled, and please stay tuned, and we'll try to get the data we have up on the site, and we can make that an interactive process too. So if there's people who are continuing to look at the numbers or collect data, and you want to share that with us, we can take a look and maybe put that up on the site too. Okay. So now we're going to move on to Ordinance 2019-16, an ordinance by Princeton accepting the donation of vacant real property located on property behind Cherry Hill Road and designated as Block 3901, Lot 2 on the Princeton tax maps. And this is a piece of property next to the Devil's Cave area by John Witherspoon Woods, and Wendy Maker from Friends of Princeton Open Space has been instrumental in helping us with this piece. So is there, well, actually I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion?
I'll make a
to
motion.
approve? It's been moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Fraga. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to a set of ordinance introductions that all have to do with various parts of our bond program, and I want to turn it over to Mr. DeShield. Do you want to start by just running through the 2019 memo, and then we'll take up each bond ordinance, or would you rather have us do it
How about
piece
if I
by
do
piece?
I'm going to do an overview and kind of go through.
Yeah, why don't you go through the overview, and then we can,
overview.
yeah.
I'd like to start. What you have before you this evening is a series of bond ordinances. They are segregated either by the fund that will fund those ordinances, and we also pulled out the library ordinances. The ordinances are in effect each year. We put together a 6-year capital plan for planning purposes, planning our capital for the next 6 years. The bond ordinances are actually our funding mechanism for all of our capital projects for the year. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through and highlight some of the major items in this year's capital plan. And what you'll see in infrastructure and public buildings, there's about $100,000 for Monument Hall. These are for major repairs on safety issues on the front steps and also the back patio to have those replaced. In addition, we have the Harrison Street PFARS property. As you know, we have an MOU with the Princeton Fire and Rescue Squad, in which we will be purchasing their property on Harrison Avenue. These are the funds based on their recent appraisal on the property, $605,000. In addition to that, I'm going to just jump down to infrastructure, streets and roads. There's money in this capital plan to move forward with doing the transportation piece of our organics program. That includes equipment or rehab of equipment for the organics program of $120,000 plus, and that would be for a garbage truck. There's also for facilities improvements to allow us to do the organics in-house of about $60,000. And I'm jumping around a bit. I'm trying to hit all the major projects. In addition, if you move on to recreation, there's $500,000 in recreation. These will be the matching funds for the Mercer County At Play grant to do the hilltop improvements to that facility. And then the other area that I will just highlight for council each year, we do fund a number of projects through for the library. And this year, there's a total of $300,000 in library improvements, and they include a range of things from technology upgrades and improvements to the restroom sinks and upgrades to counters in the library. Are there any questions on any of the items that are within any of the bond ordinances?
I just had a more general question about the number of items that we're bonding for that are essentially the same year to year to year. And we had talked about this earlier, but I think it would be helpful to ask CFAC to help us with a plan for how do we start moving some of these expenditures into our operating budget. Because if we're, say, get an example here, but, you know, we're spending $30,000 on some set of equipment every single year, year after year, and we're bonding for it. We're not just paying for the $30,000, we're paying interest on that, and it doesn't really make sense. So it's hard to start doing that because we're paying the interest from previous years this year also. So, you know, how to break ourselves from the habit. But I do think it would be worthwhile to ask CFAC for their help in putting together a plan to help us gradually move more. And I know Mr. DeShield has been, when the opportunity presents itself, trying to seize those opportunities. But I think having a more intentional strategy would be, you know, financially prudent for us as we move forward.
Just a reminder, and everyone, I'm not sure, just to make sure everyone understands, that is something that has been a priority. We put $200,000 a year to fund some of these capital projects in the budget, but we can always look at a program that could do more and expand that.
Right. I think we did about 5 years ago. I thought we looked at that and came up with a policy that we were going to do it, but I think it's really important that we keep at it. I mean,
that's the $200,000 that we started. Again, the issue is you have to raise that in the current fund budget.
I know. I thought, but I could be not remembering correctly. But I thought because it is a real. Maybe it was worded differently, but it was. I thought we passed a policy about it. We didn't?
No, I think in general what we did was we said we put $200,000 away that we said, and we would continue to build on that each year. And again, it wouldn't hurt to have CFAC kind of go through. It really comes down to it's very difficult to put that type of money in your current fund budget because it has a tax impact each year. And
Yeah, because I mean, I agree with
a plan.
completely that it makes a lot of sense to do. So I think we should talk about it.
I just want to point out, Scott talks a lot about the appropriateness of borrowing for certain kinds of expenses that have future benefits as opposed to current benefits. And I think there are also implications for, how the bond rating companies view you. If you don't borrow enough, they may not like you even less than, if you borrow too much. So I think it's a really subtle issue, and I know that CFAC has developed a policy for the correct level of debt, and if we're talking about really dropping below that level, we want to think carefully about it. It sounds great, save the interest cost, but I think there are a lot of other things that need to be weighed alongside.
Yep, sure.
Just please remind me what's covered under Section 20 costs. These are administrative costs for the bond, legal, and what's covered under Section 20?
That's exactly right. It's the bond, legal costs, advertising costs, all the costs, administrative costs for the bond ordinances.
And we anticipate that going down by 25,000 over the next 5 years, if I'm reading this correctly?
What are you referring to? You're looking at the...
Sheet 13 of the 6-year plan detail. I think it's great that we're...
No, that's just based on, the reason it's going down, it's just based on as the total expenses are going down, and quite frankly, this is a 5-year plan. I would suspect as we get through each year, we redefine those numbers, and they usually go in the opposite direction, to be clear.
I just a quick question that really has nothing to do with the budget, but do we have plans for the Harrison Street PFARS property? I don't know of any, but I'm just wondering if that's something that...
I think that's something council has to decide.
Yeah, so in the MOU, I think there might be some language in there that it could be used as a potential affordable housing site, but it's not specified exactly what it's used for. Obviously, for the near term, it's going to be used as the PFARS building until the new headquarters is ready. But that will be something that we should probably bring some proposals to council as to what the potential is for that. One is to sell it, and another is to use it for some municipal purpose. And, I know we've been talking about, are there ways that we might be able to centralize operations here, and, maybe there's some overflow from Monument Hall that can be put there. I mean, it's always great to have an extra site to sort of think about what is the best use for that site for the town.
Okay, I didn't know if it was open or had been decided.
It has not been
firmly
decided yet.
I mean, but I do want to say, when we approved the deal with PFARS, I was afraid that this would happen, that we would, because we thought of those donations of those properties as offsetting the costs, helping to offset the cost of the PFARS building. So we have to be careful not to just think of it as free. We're paying for it. So we have to decide if we decide we're going to use it, say, for affordable housing, we have to say, would we spend that money on those for that affordable housing site? Or could it be, I don't know what the best use for it is, but I just want to be careful not to think that we be really prudent about it and not grow our debt. And I think I like the idea of looking at it in terms of all of the buildings and Monument Hall, and it could be even selling that and using that to fund an addition on this building or something like that.
Yeah, so I am looking at the 6-year budget as well, and the thing that jumps out at me is that this year is so low compared to the next 5 years, and in particular that the engineering capital expenses are shown as so high. And I wonder whether that relates to the discussion we've had a couple times in the last couple months about whether we are being realistic or eyes bigger than our stomach in terms of how much we can bite off in terms of getting engineering projects designed, out to bid and built, or are these numbers not realistic, or do we have to think about how we plan those projects in a different way to make sure that we're doing the work on a timetable that keeps our infrastructure in good shape?
There are two things that kind of drive particularly some of these major projects. One of the things, as you can see, each year what we try to come in, and this is part of one of the CFAC numbers, is a net of $7 million, around $7 million in capital expenditures. You'll see $10 million here. However, part of that is funded through, there's the sewer operating fees. So it comes down to about $7 million, which is kind of the target. And I know we've had some discussions with CFAC to see whether that $7 million is the right number. But that's the kind of target. And you'll see in the planning phases they are substantially higher. But quite frankly, each year what we do is we go in and we reevaluate and try to prioritize, what will be funded that year. In addition, we're trying to factor in also moving forward are just how much can we really get done in a year. And what we've done in the past all the times is we've actually funded more than we could possibly do. So we're trying to match those also to the funding level to what we can actually complete in a year.
Okay, but if we need to be completing more than we can actually complete, that means not changing the budget, but changing the way we're trying to execute, right?
And the other thing I'll just remind council, in terms of all of this, we also keep in mind that all of these capital projects, there is a down payment required, which is a big piece on our budget. It's about $300,000 to do the $7 million here. Anytime you increase that amount, just so that everyone's clear, you're talking about putting substantial money also in your down payment line in the budget, which is a significant increase. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. If you decide to do more, there are other things we need to weigh.
It's not only that, it also is going to increase our operating budget, because if we need more engineering staff or something like that, right. I mean, we really need to be grappling with this. It's becoming more and more clear to me that we're not keeping up with our infrastructure needs in town, I think. So.
But I also want to thank you for, I know this is an edited version of what comes to you. And so, although we're asking you to spend more, we're thankful that you're also holding the line too. Are there any other questions for Mr. DeShield? Okay. Are you done with that? Okay. All right. So then why don't we take these up ordinance by ordinance, and if people have further questions, we can address them through each of these. So the first is Ordinance 2019-17, bond ordinance providing for parking utility improvements consisting of repairs to the Spring Street Garage in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $22,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $22,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. And just to be clear, this is money that's coming out of the parking fund specifically. Okay.
That is correct.
I'll move it.
It's been moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Well, I do have a question.
Oh.
Since we're having a regular meeting on the 6th of May.
I will say the right thing when it comes to that. Thank you for the reminder, though.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller? Yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 6th, 2019, which is different than what is listed on the agenda.
Mayor, since 2019-18 involves the library, I'll be recusing.
Okay. So next is Ordinance 2019-18, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the library in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $300,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $285,550 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the cost thereof.
I'll move.
It's moved by Ms.
I'll
Krummeller.
second it.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 6, 2019. Next is Ordinance 2019-19, ordinance appropriating $790,000 from sewer connection fees for various improvements in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by, or motion to introduce, moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 6, 2019. Next is Ordinance 2019-20, bond ordinance providing for sanitary sewer system and road reconstruction projects in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $1,515,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $1,515,000 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance the cost thereof. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 6, 2019. Next is Ordinance 2019-21, bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements in and by Princeton in the County of Mercer, New Jersey, appropriating $7,433,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $7,061,350 bonds or notes of Princeton to finance part of the cost thereof. Is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Moved by Ms.
Second.
Krummeller, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any further discussion or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will be on May 6, 2019. It has come to my attention that we are not broadcasting at the moment, and I just want to make sure that there's a recording happening.
We're not broadcasting live. We're recording and we're taping it.
Okay.
But we're not at that point yet because what we're doing is, as you know, we're actually having some training so that once we broadcast, we'll also be streaming at the same time.
Okay, great. But this is being recorded.
Correct.
Okay, terrific, and it will be put on the website. All right, so now we come to resolutions. First resolution is 19-127, resolution authorizing a payment of $170,000 to the Princeton Public Schools for 2018-2019 school year hazardous busing transportation costs. Is there a motion to approve, and then we can
I'll move it.
discuss? Moved by Ms. Krummeller.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion?
I actually had a question. I'm
Mhm.
not sure who can answer it. I know it wasn't made public, but I did see the list of the names of the students.
That was taken down.
I know. Yeah, I noticed that too in the agenda. But But because I saw the names, I did see, and I recognize the names. And I know in some instances there's students who drive to school that are on that list. So is there no way, do we pay it regardless of whether the transportation is being used or not?
So this is something where there's a back and forth between the town and the school district every year, and that conversation is ongoing, but I think that should be raised with the district, that we don't want to be paying for services that aren't being used.
Right.
For
I
sure.
said not only the students who drive, but also some of the names that I recognize, I know because they refuse to take the bus, they're driven to school.
Right.
So I just...
Again, I think the mayor is correct. We're having ongoing discussions on the issue.
Right. But maybe that Councilwoman Fraga's concern can be relayed. Okay, terrific. All right. Any other?
And just, I'm confused about the posting of the names. Was that in our...
That was inadvertent and it's been taken down.
In our packet?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Any other questions or concerns? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 19-128, resolution authorizing an extraordinary unspecifiable service contract with the Princeton Senior Resource Center to provide various programs and services to older adults and their families in amount not to exceed $149,400. And I'm sorry I didn't move this up earlier for you all. But is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any discussion? Would you like to come speak?
I think I just wanted to point out the change that was made.
Oh, right. Thank you.
To emphasize, add in that the services are provided to Princeton residents, apropos our earlier discussion about Princeton PCTV. These services that we're paying for are for our residents, whereas the senior center provides services for other residents that are paid for out of their charitable contributions.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to address you all this evening about the contract between the Princeton Senior Resource Center and the municipality. We are certainly encouraged by a partnership that's allowed us to provide services to the senior community in Princeton for nearly 45 years now. Even though I am a native of Princeton, born at the old medical center, I am the new kid on the block at the Princeton Senior Resource Center, having been here for only 5 weeks, and so coming to address you in that short time as we reflect on the contract. So I'm looking forward to working with Mayor Lempert and members of the council, as well as Mr. DeShield and Mr. Grosser and other employees of the municipality as we move forward. This afternoon we were given 4 hours to prepare for tonight's meeting, having not been notified until that time that we were on the agenda, nor of the significant change to the contract that's being presented. And so in that short time we had an opportunity to review some statistics and numbers that we were able to pull together for you that I'd like to share with you in response to this change to the contract that we hadn't seen until this afternoon. The annual budget for the Princeton Senior Resource Center, as you know, last year was $874,493 to provide all of our services, and the contract with the municipality was for $146,000. So that represents approximately 16.7% of the budget of the Princeton Senior Resource Center that's provided by our contract with the municipality. In the past year, when we look at the members or the participants in Princeton Senior Resource Center activities, there were 780 unique individual participants in PSRC and over 1,873 if you count multiple registrations. We had 780 people that participated uniquely. We had over 1,600 people that were registered in different programs. Of those, when we count just the unique resident or the unique participants, 680 were residents of the municipality, 100 were members or residents of other municipalities beyond Princeton. If you include all, that represents 87.1% of the participants in the Senior Resource Center are members or residents in the municipality. For nearly all the programs offered through PSRC, non-residents are charged an additional surcharge. So we charge for almost all of our programs. As you know, there's a 33% surcharge that's charged for non-residents. So I can give you examples of that if requested. As you know, as a community-based 501c3 nonprofit, 83.3% of our funding comes from non-municipal sources. It comes from corporate sponsorships, private donors, community grants, special events, and program fees. And in that past year, we received donations or sponsorship from 631 Princeton residents and 626 non-Princeton residents. That's roughly 50.2% and 49.8% of our participating donors from private donations. We certainly affirm that funds procured through the PSRC municipal contract, as was shared earlier in the meeting this evening, would be used for programs that support Princeton residents and their families. At the same time, we need to affirm that the total programming efforts of PSRC that continue to make such services available to the community even beyond Princeton will need to be able to continue that. And so we have no way of breaking down programs that are specific to residents and non-residents, but what we do have is programs that, or we have a percentage that far outweighs what the municipal contract is for. So we have over 87% of our participants are residents of Princeton, while only 16.7% of our budget comes from the municipality. So given the proposed amendment, one of the things that we would suggest to be considered is if we're going to have that line of Princeton residents, that we would have a line similar to this. The provider agrees to ensure that the total percentage of program participants from the municipality of Princeton minimally aligns with the municipal portion of the provider's annual budget. And so that would ensure that the percentage of total budget funds equals, at very minimum, the total of participants beyond the municipality and within the municipality. We were able to pull those numbers together in 4 hours, so it doesn't cause an undue burden on us to report those numbers, and I think that would satisfy the need of the residents to ensure that their tax dollars are going to support members and residents of the Princeton community. So we appreciate consideration in that regard.
Okay, so first of all, I'm very sorry about the last minute notice on this, and if it is an issue, I think we can sort of set it aside tonight and have further conversations about it. I think that it would sort of been our assumption that it wouldn't.
I thought it was every year. I thought it was in the contract every year. I didn't know this was changing anything.
The amendment that was proposed adds the words provides services to older adults and their families residing within the municipality of Princeton. So that phrase, reside, which we completely understand for what it means for taxpayers in Princeton. So all we would ask is that we have that additional line which stipulates that we will always ensure that our participant ratio is at minimum equal to the equal to the tax ratio of the municipal contract versus the total budget of PSRC. We're not even close to that. So there's some assumptions that we think are out there, and I'm joined by 3 members of our board tonight who are also Princeton residents. There's some assumptions that there are a great deal of non-Princeton residents participating, and that's overwhelming the PSRC, what we're able to do, but that really is less than 15%. It's 13% of all of our participants who are non-Princeton residents.
Yeah, Ms. Miller, and then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that your statistic, because my mother was in her bridge group, it was definitely like half of her bridge group were out of town, and then my mother, who has moved from Princeton within the last year, also told me that that some of the residents were complaining to her. Now I can say this because she's moved, but about non-residents taking spaces in some of the programs. So I'm just passing that along. That's my kind of my impression. So your statistics were really interesting. But can you repeat, when you were talking about the donors, you said there were how many donors from Princeton and how many from not Princeton?
631 from Princeton 626 who are not from Princeton
So that's like half and half, so that's really interesting.
for our private donors, which is over 80% of our budget.
Mr. Cohen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I wish the folks from PCTV were still here to hear your presentation, because I think really, in my mind, and I think the minds of a lot of people up on the dais here, PSRC is a model of what a nonprofit in Princeton should be, both providing services to our community, providing support for its own mission, and providing services to those from outside the community. We have no problem being locusts of, wonderful cultural, civic, social offerings for the whole region in Princeton. So I just want to reassure you that, that one little line, as Jenny commented before you even spoke, to me is a line that says, look, PCTV, the amount of money that other organizations in town get from the municipality are going largely to Princeton residents.
If I may, just the amendment, and it seems like you may have taken it differently. The amendment was just to, if you looked at the contract, it just does not identify. We know that there are different sources of individuals being serviced by PSRC.
Sure.
We were just trying to identify that that this contract was supporting Princeton residents and not just a general contribution to PSRC. And it seems you may have taken that a little differently. That's all we were trying to accomplish with that.
Absolutely.
Partly to keep things consistent with and clear.
Just to be clear.
Right. And, when we're talking about like counseling and consultation and support services, I mean, I'm sure you appreciate, like for us, we can't be as sort of the protectors of the taxpayer money for Princeton be paying for those services where people are coming in from other communities where they have those services in West Windsor already being provided for them, or Montgomery. And so it's just not, we are not going to be able to do what we need to do for our residents if we're taking on the responsibility for the whole region. So it's not saying like we want to put locks on the doors and not allow people in for programs. It's more of the services that we're paying for, which my understanding was a lot of this contract was, the well visits and everything else like that for the municipal portion of the money, that should be supporting those specific senior services that we've always contracted with PSRC to provide for our vulnerable residents. Absolutely. And it's not a community service. This is a oftentimes like a health and welfare program for Princeton residents paid for by Princeton taxpayers.
Certainly. And I would affirm, the use of the phrase to delineate that, because I do believe we need to be clear with people who are paying taxes that they are paying for municipal residents. I think the challenge is when that line comes prior to enumerating all of the programs that we offer, that we do offer information and referral services, for instance, to both Princeton residents and non-Princeton residents. The percentage of the budget that comes through our contract is minimal compared to the percentage of participants. And those participants are not only program participants, but also people who are referred for counseling and otherwise that come through our doors. So all we want to do is be certain that we are not saying that all of these programs are for Princeton residents only, because that's where it comes, where the suggested amendment comes in the contract. That's the appearance that we have, which is why we would be comfortable with a line that simply says we will always make sure that the percentage of Princeton participants exceeds the percentage of municipal tax dollars that are being spent for the PSRC program.
I mean, I guess my concern with that is that it feels like if there's that we're contracting with PSRC to provide these resources for Princeton residents, and let's say you get a $1 billion contribution from Michael Bloomberg, say, it's like,
perfect.
Then that means essentially like there's going to be 0.1% of the municipal contribution. And we actually are counting on you to provide these services for every single Princeton elderly person who needs it. And I think that maybe we should pull this and work on the wordsmithing before
If that's
the
what it is, I
next
think
meeting.
that's a great idea.
I
We
think
can
we
always
should,
come
because
up
I
with
feel the same way.
If the concern is just the way it's, the wording,
Yes.
that's just a matter of sitting down and making.
Yeah, and I feel like it's, you know, I'm sorry we're doing this here too, because we want to,
Right.
we want to, we want to have, I think it was misinterpreted what we're trying to say, and we want to get the language right.
Yep.
So let's just, why don't we pull it, and between now and May 6th, we'll get something that is, the language matches, I think, what we're both saying.
Absolutely.
I don't see it as being a strenuous negotiation, so.
Right. I think we're saying the same things. I think we want to be clear with placement in the contract
Right.
that it doesn't apply that we're offering these services only to Princeton residents.
Right.
Because that would, you know, shut down 50% of our funding stream of non-Princeton residents.
Right, and that's not the intention. I think
Right.
the intention is that we want the money that the municipality is contributing to pay for a minimal level of service for Princeton residents. So we'll make sure we.
We'll work it out.
Mark is gonna. Yeah, this is one of the easy things, and we'll see you back on May 6th. So.
Okay.
Sorry
Thank you.
to
Thank you.
sorry
you.
to have your whole evening here, but
We won't
appreciate
make
all
you
the
sit
work.
through the whole meeting on the 6th.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll try to bump you up to the top next time. Okay, and then last resolution is 19-129, resolution authorizing and directed to enter into a lease agreement with the Housing Initiatives of Princeton for 2 years in order to lease 140 Griggs Drive, and the amount paid by the trust to Princeton total, this is not quite grammatical, but whatever, trust to Princeton totals $4,258.32. Is there a motion
I'll
to?
move it.
I'll second.
Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Kremler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda?
Item 8, I'd like to have removed because I have a conflict on that one.
Okay.
I'll move all items except.
Okay. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
So
Aye.
moved by Ms. Kreml. Let's do it right. I know people want to get out of here. All right, moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The consent agenda 1 through 7 passes. And next, item 8, which is a performance guarantee reduction to the new amount of $66,482.78, bond $59,834.50, cash $6,648.28 for 645 State Road, Block 2701, Lot 3, major site plan and conditional use with variances, Jishabad Lubavitch of Mercer County.
I'll move it.
Moved by Ms. Kremler,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. And is there a
So
motion to
moved.
adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Or is that still for municipal property? Old term lease uses so
Oh,
much.
the last resolution pertained to me.